Hey guys, welcome back to one more video. Today we are going to be looking at more of the router. So in the last few episodes, a few episodes ago, we did add the router and the history object, but we haven't really used it other than to add this switch statement. But today we'll learn more about using the router and the history and how we can use it for updating our components. First of all, we can see that there's some problems here with the padding and the margins. We can also use Flexbox to fix this problem. So I'm highlighting the sidebar here, which is the blue box. And what I'm going to do is add a display flex. So that means the default is row. So all the elements inside of the blue box will be in a row fashion. But we can quickly change that to flex direction column. And that looks pretty good, but it looks the same as before. So we can use one more property in Flexbox called align items and then make it center. So if we copy this and add this to our sidebar property, so in our sidebar CSS we just have to add all the items that we just added in Chrome. Alright, that looks pretty good. So now we need a new component actually for our weather details. So let's go ahead and create that folder. So to start this component, I'm going to use a snippet called RFC, which is a React functional component, and then just press tab, which will kind of fill out a template that we can use. So it adds our props and the props type, and also imports React for us. If you need this extension, you can just look for React snippets, or without the dash, and this is the one that I'm using here from Running Coder. So it just makes your life easier. I mean, if you're brand new to React, you should probably type this out because it'll just be like a learning experience. But if you've typed it thousands of times, there's no reason to type it again. So for now, our weather details will just be a div. And for the width, we'll keep it at, well, this is actually going to be inside of a Flexbox. So what we'll do is make it flex grow 1, which will mean that it can take the rest of the space inside of the Flexbox. So what I plan to do here is, if we look at our application, our application has now one more component called weather info. So what we can do is add a display flex to weather info, and then the sidebar will be of static width, which will be 300 pixels, and then the weather info can expand or collapse based on the height of the window. So that's why this is flex grow 1. But if we go and find our weather info CSS, what we'll do here is make it display flex, and the width of this will also be 100%, same as the height. And the flex direction is going to be row, but that's default. But what we need to add is flex wrap as no wrap, so the elements will not wrap to the next row. They'll all be in this single first row. Just for clarity, we'll make the flex direction here as row. So then let's find our weather info TSX and add our weather details component. I believe this needs to be exported as a function. We won't use default exports for now. And for importing that, you can press Command or Control, I believe, on Windows, and press the dot button. So this one says no code actions available, but if I remove that and press Command dot on Mac, then it shows me the option to import. Okay, so let's see what our JSX looks like now. So we have the sidebar and we have the weather details. I believe we're just missing a import here. Okay, so now we have a sidebar, which is always 300, and then weather details spans across the rest of the page. So if I make this a little bit bigger, then we can see that the weather details also gets bigger with it. And this history component now is required in many other components as we start using it to change our route. So what I'll actually do is create a new file in the store and call it history.ts. And we'll just export it from here, just so it's in a single place, and we can go ahead and import that. Okay, so this statement does not change. We're just now importing it from our stores folder. So in our sidebar component, now we have our list of cities, right? But what do we actually want to happen when you click on this search result? So when you click on this search result, for example, Fairfield, so what I actually want to happen is there should be a question mark here, which will be a search parameter, city equal to Fairfield. So something like that. And then once we click on this, the route should update. And then the component here, which is for the weather details, will read this search parameter and then update its own component. So it's kind of like we are going one way. Click here, we update the route. The route then pushes down as a property or as a hook to the weather details component. So first of all, we need to go to our sidebar. And for every single city, now we need to add an onClick function. And in the onClick, we know which city has been clicked on, so we know the name of it. Instead of making this inline, I'm just going to add a function here. So here we'll get the city. And then what we should do here is route to the city name. So name would equal, city.name. So here it says that the onClick property is not assignable and it doesn't exist on this search result. So which is true, but because if we go to our search result, it only accepts data. It doesn't accept onClick. So what we actually need to do is forward our onClick onto the first div that it renders. So onClick, it does exist on a div. So what we can do here is just forward the props, basically. So we're gonna just forward onClick in this case. So it'll be props.onClick. And to get the type, again, we can use the hover attribute, and then this will be of type event to void. So we can replace that up here, and now everything is happy. So we have the onClick property, which will get forwarded on to the first div that can be forwarded to. Okay, for now, let's just console log something here, just so we know something's happening. We'll just log the city out. And one other thing we should do is every time we hover over the search result, we need to make it like a pointer for the mouse. So the mouse should be a pointer. So let's look at the console here. And as you can see, once we click on it, we do get the name or the city logged to the console. And here what we'll do is we'll import the history object. So let's just try and see if it works. History, we'll import that. Nope. So we can see that the history object has this method called push, and all it takes is a path for it as a string. So we can just give it a URL or a path here that we want to set. So we'll add a string for weather, so since that's what our path should be, and then a question mark, like we decided here that it should be city equals to Fairfield, which is the name. So what we'll do is add the same kind of format here. So the city will equal to something. Now this variable is in our city object. So we can add the name right here, city.name. Save that. So what that'll do is push this to the browser's history. And once we start clicking on it, we can see that it's changing. And if I hold to the back button, we can actually go back and forward using the back browser buttons. So that works perfectly, but we need to actually be able to read that in this component, the blank component, which is the weather details. So let's go to the weather details. And right now it's pretty empty, so we can actually start using a hook from React Router called useLocation. So we'll just get location equals to useLocation, and that'll be a function. So that if we go into the details of this, it'll return a location state. And here, let's just print that out, or let's try and show what that actually has in it. So we can see the same search property is here. So let's see if we can actually get it off of the URL. Yep, so here it is, so city equals to Fairfield. Now we need to actually get the city name out of it. In our case, it's pretty simple, but maybe we can write a function that is more generic to get an object out of this. So the search is a string right now, but it would be nice if we get an object that says city and then the value of the city property is Fairfield, right? So let's write a function called convert search to object. And this will take a string called search. And first of all, we know that we don't need the question mark. So the default value, if it doesn't exist in this case, will just be empty. And if we need to remove the question mark, we'll just split the search. We'll split it by the question mark. So that'll basically get you anything before the question mark and anything after the question mark. So that should be after the, we only care about after the question mark. And then we need to split by, so after the question mark, if we want to add more parameters, we use the and property or and character. So maybe city equals Fairfield and user equals 1, 2, 3, 4. So let's just take this as a input. So let's work with this one. So we'll make that search equals to that so we can see what's going on. So here, this one will give search split by question mark. So this will be the second element in the array. And if that exists, then we should split again. But this time we'll split by the and sign. So we'll make a variable called all strings, and this will be a substring dot split by the and sign. So what this will be is the first property will be city equals Fairfield, the second property will be user equals 1, 2, 3, 4. So now we can actually make our object. We'll just call it params and put it in and put the value as an empty object. Now we need to actually loop through all strings. So we'll write a for each function, and for each string, so for let's say item, for each item we need to split it again by the equal sign. So we'll just call it split in this case, and we will split each item by the equal sign. So now split 0 will be the name of the property, and split 1 will be the name of the city or the value. So what we'll do is params split 0 will equal to split 1. So this is our value, split 1, and then params of whatever is in split 0 will equal to that. So this is complaining because it doesn't know that it should be any. So in our case, it's not actually going to be any, it's going to be a key of string. And the property will also be a string. So we know that up front, so we can write that up there as a type. And here we'll just return params. And otherwise, if the substring does not exist, we can just return an empty object. So here now, instead of just hard coding this in here, what we can do is actually render that. So let's call the function, and we will pass in location.search. So let's see if we find any issues with this. And yes. So in this case, we should actually use the question mark right here so that we only check the length if it actually does exist. Okay, so the problem I was actually having is that the object is not technically a React component, so we need to actually stringify this so we can display the string version of the object. So now if we click here, we can see that the city Fairfield is in the router, and now here this is represented in an object instead of a string. So what that actually gives us is now we can say, we can convert it to an object and then use the dot properties, for example, params.city, something like that. So let's actually do that. So we need to actually use an effect here, right? So whenever our params object updates, so the dependency will be search object. So whenever location.search updates, what we can do is first convert it to an object. So we'll just call it search equal to that. City name will be search.city. I just want to mention that there are many different ways that you could go about doing something like this. I just wanted to show you how to use this hook use location, as well as use the history object to your advantage. Another way that you could go about doing this is actually just update it in the store. But it does provide some value to the user of this application when you can read from the history object or from the browser URL, because now if I refresh here, we still have the state preserved. So we're actually reading from here and then updating the store instead of just relying on the store by itself. But yeah, eventually we should probably go to the city context and add one more state object here called, selected city, something like that. So actually, let's try and implement that right now. So what we'll do is add another state object, so that this will be for the selected city. And again, this will use state as for the city object. This will be a array. And to begin with, it'll be undefined again. So in the selected city, and just like we added our cities, we also need to kind of replicate our new selected city. And this won't be an array, but it'll just be a single city. So the value is still not really happy with it because undefined is not. So basically, this can also be undefined. Yep, that should work. Okay, so in our weather details, whenever we set the city name, now we need to actually find the city object. So we know we need to use the city context. So what we'll do is const city context equal to use context, and we need to use the city context here. So all of that gets auto imported city context from our stores. And once we know the city name, we should be able to find the actual city object pretty quickly. So what we can do is city context dot cities. So that'll be the list of all cities. And we'll try to find a city where the city name equals the city name, or city dot name. So once we find that, we know that this is the city. So that's the selected one that the user wants. And instead of just setting the city right here, we don't really need this anymore. That was just for showing that we can set it. And once we know the selected city, what we can do is go to context, city context dot set selected city, and just set it to selected. And here, instead of displaying the city, what we'll do is stringify the selected city again. Let's see. So this might be undefined. Okay, so now we can actually get the actual data from our state based on what the URL says. And in the next video, what we'll do is actually convert this into real weather data. So we'll have to call another API and also display all the weather data in this component instead of just displaying our state. So if you'd like to see more videos like this or learn more about front-end development, please subscribe and like this video so that more people can see it. Maybe it helps somebody out. And if you have any questions or suggestions for this series or for the channel, please do comment down below.